And welcome to the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast, where we're joined by Noel and Jason O'Connor once again. Good evening, lads. Jason, just to start with yourself on the defeat to Bray for Treaty United last week, 1-0 defeat in the last minute, injury time penalty conceded by Charlie Fleming. Tommy Barrett mentioned, and his coaching team mentioned, that they wanted a response performance-wise at the very least from the previous week against Cabinteely when they lost 4-1. Do you believe that they got that response in terms of the performance, if not in the result?
They did, yeah. A lot more solid defensively. We kind of flagged that things would improve with Anto O'Donnell in there, and they certainly did, in my opinion. I thought Edward McCarthy was excellent in the middle of the field. I've been kind of champing for him to get a go in there, as you know. I thought he was really, really good. Some of his play, he moved the ball very quickly when he got it. He wasn't delaying on the ball. He screened very well in front of the defence, coming across and cutting some balls out. So that was a positive as well. I thought McSweeney did well. And they were very unfortunate not to come away with a point, really. Moment of madness from Charlie Fleming. You know, it's Richie O'Farrell, isn't it? And his back is to the goal, and Charlie needs to keep it that way. You know, and look, it's a rush of blood. That's what it is. But over the 3 games, I suppose, against Bray, you've won 1, you've lost 1, you've drawn 1. So Treaty can't really complain too much, Adrian. Certainly a big improvement on the Cabinteely performance. Again, Red Hanlon, a very, very big miss in my opinion. Easy enough evening for Jones and Quinn at the back for Bray. But look, they had a lot of possession. They didn't create much, clear cut. So yeah, Tommy definitely got a response from the team he had out.
Noel, would you agree with that you feel like the management team got a response in that performance in Bray?
Oh, they did, absolutely. And they did play well. I thought the first 10 minutes they actually were on the front foot. And as the game went on, they did retreat into their own half. But Jason is spot on. I think Bray's first shot on target was the penalty. I thought Bray played better in terms of they had more width in it, particularly on the left-hand side, but didn't really create a whole lot. Now, in fairness, Treaty didn't either, but it certainly would have been a great point. And I suppose it was the first time that Treaty were, you know, at the end of a result. They've certainly scored a few late goals themselves, but it's the first time that they've conceded a late goal. And I suppose over the course of the season, it is going to happen. And I suppose the disappointing thing now is it's 2 defeats on the bounce. And there is going to be a little bit of concern around the place, I think. Not so much the fact that they've lost the 2, but the fact that, you know, you have a resurgent Cork with two very good wins in the last 2 weeks, scoring 6 goals as well. And with still 8 games to go, Treaty certainly need to, you know, just get a couple of wins and keep the gap wide enough that they don't start to get a bit nervous, if you like, because at the moment they should be okay, but the next couple of games are certainly going to be very important for them.
Yeah, certainly. And Jason, Noel mentioned obviously it's the first time this season that Treaty have lost back-to-back games in the league. It provides a different challenge, obviously, for the players in terms of mindset and mentality going into games. Obviously, as well, it shows how well they've done this season, that it's taken to this point to have back-to-back defeats as well, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And look, you can look at it 2 ways, Adrian. You know, this week, Bray are playing Shelbourne. You'd expect Shelbourne to beat them. I know we'll get to that in a bit. And you'd expect Treaty to beat Wexford. So if them 2 results go as predicted, the last week's result is gone and 2 more games have passed. You know, I agree with Noel. Cork are certainly resurgent, and Doolin going in at Athlone is definitely going to give them a lift. They'll be most improved, I think, under him. But look, 2 massive games coming up for Treaty, Wexford and Cove, and I think if they were to return 6 points out of them 2 games, I think the gap then is probably just too much for the likes of Cork and Athlone, and they'll probably run out of games. But if you fail to get 6 points in these 2 games, nerves will creep in, and it's a very young squad, and they're not built really for pressure, let's be honest. No one expected them to be in this position, so it was kind of carefree all along. As Tommy said, taking it a game at a time, but now we're into real crunch time of the season, and they need to deliver, Adrian. They need to get 2 wins now, Wexford and Cove.
Yeah, Noel, I know you mentioned obviously Cork's resurgence, and actually talking to maybe a couple of committee members after the game with Treaty United, there was certainly concern about Cork's resurgence and wins in recently and performance. They're still don't know, there's 8 games to go. It's 11 points a lead. I mean, that's effectively a 5-game swing. I know anything can happen in football, but do you really think that's a possibility that Cork can catch Treaty?
Well, possibly not Treaty, but certainly I think compared to the first 2 series of games, it looks to me like that Cork are certainly going to finish very strong. I'm sure that they were ruling out Galway's chance of making the playoffs last year at this stage, and we all know what happened when John Caulfield came in. I think there's a chance. There's always a chance in football. Momentum is really, really important, and I was only thinking about it last Friday night. You could have the last game of the season with Galway looking to win the league and Cork looking to secure a playoff place, because I think the last game is Cork and Galway in Turner's Cross. With John Caulfield going down there, and it's just amazing how these fixtures can throw up, and because of that, and I think if they are within earshot of a playoff place with 2 games to go, they can still be 6 points behind with 2 games to go, and if they win their last 2 games and results go their way, well, then they could sneak in. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out at the moment. It's obviously something that we'll be reviewing in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, certainly. And Jason, just to move on to Friday's game, you obviously alluded to it already that they have Wexford at home. They've beaten Wexford twice, Treaty already this season. This week in training, you'd imagine Tommy will be, trying to bring perspective to the squad and calm the squad down, because Wexford, they've came off a win against Cabinteely. Now, as you mentioned, there's probably a bit more pressure, because if you look at the fixtures, Cove and Wexford being down towards the bottom end, particularly Wexford, this is a game they'll really be targeting to win, just to ease that pressure, if we'll call it that, slightly. So that in itself changes everything, isn't it? Because players' mindsets is vital going into games like these.
Well, they are, Adrian, most definitely, and it's to stop the run of defeats. That's what it is, really. I don't think they'll be too worried about the table just yet. And a lot will depend on Kieran Hanlon's fitness, whether he's back in the starting 11, because Treaty did look a bit toothless. It'd be unfair to aim criticism at Conor Melody. It's his first start to the season. He's obviously not up to match fitness, and he's a different type of player, obviously, to Kieran Hanlon. And as I said, it was an easy enough evening for the Bray centre back. So scoring goals could be the issue. But look, we know how strong Treaty are at set pieces. It could be back to the early season form of Treaty, based on that solid at the back, not giving anything away and not playing in the wrong areas. And we saw that last week from Anto. He was straight in. He was putting the ball forward at nearly every opportunity. Some excellent balls in behind, some other balls that were cut out, and then Treaty were able to pick up the second ball. So they won't be too worried, I don't think. But look, Wexford under Ian Ryan, there's definitely an improvement. I don't think anyone can argue with that, performance-wise anyway, and a big result for them last week against Cabinteely. There's goals in them, Adrian. That's the thing that would concern me. Jack Moylan, 4 goals in 7 starts. Kyle Robinson, 7 goals this season. And we also know about Jack Doherty as well, So there is goals in that Wexford team, so that would concern me. But I think if Kieran Hanlon is fit, or even McKevitt is available, then I think Treaty will have enough to get over the line.
Yeah, obviously when you've lost a couple of games, Noel, almost any team feels like they can threaten you, and as Jason mentioned, there were the 3 players I was thinking about actually in Jack Moylan, who's burst onto the scene for Wexford. You've Kyle Robinson, who's already scored against Treaty this season. Then you've Jack Doherty, who we know about with Limerick FC and play with Longford Town and Wexford too. Those 3 lads are big threats, firstly, for Treaty that need to be nullified. But secondly, we saw it in Ferry Carrick Park. Anto O'Donnell also has 2 goals against Wexford this season from set pieces. They could have had 4 goals against Wexford in set pieces. I'm sure that's certainly an area that Treaty will be targeting as well on Friday night.
I'd say so, yeah. And in saying that, I suppose, while they haven't been winning a lot of games, they've beaten Cabinteely twice, if you like, in the last 4 or 5 weeks. They beat them in the cup as well. they're not conceding the amount of goals, say, that they were in the early part of the season. Like, we did speak about a narrow defeat to Shelburne as well. But certainly it is a massive plus for Treaty, with Mark Ludden taking the corners and the likes of Anta O'Donnell and Jack Lynch getting in the box. And you would think now that it's something maybe that Ian Ryan, will be working on this week. And I think the mindset, as Jason said, is important as well, because like Wexford don't really have any fear. They can go out and have a real go, and I think they will. If they lose to Treaty, there's no one going to say, oh, that's a shock. Whereas if they can get something here, they're probably already looking at next season and trying to, just build a bit of momentum for themselves going into the last series of games. And I think they're going to be a real handful for Treaty on Friday night.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, Jason, about maybe Ed McCarthy and Matt Keane. Before I thought about it, Ed McCarthy was actually on the sideline watching my own match on Saturday in Moyross, where we were beaten heavily 4-0. So he'll probably be wondering why I'm hosting a show, critiquing maybe or discussing their performances week in, week out after that. But on the note, you did mention, Jason, that maybe, obviously you mentioned Treaty had to go back to basics and maybe go back to the players who had got them, that far. And Matt Keane and Ed McCarthy were two of those. Ahead of the Wexford game, do you think those lads did enough? I know you probably believe that with Ed, but do you think both Ed and Matt Keane did enough to keep their places now in the side?
Yeah, I do. Look, Charlie Fleming obviously gave away the penalty. He was poor as well the week before against Cabinteely. So will Tommy be tempted to take him out of the side and maybe put Ed back in at right back, put Matt Keane ahead of him? I think I already said, obviously, Edward was excellent in the middle of the field. And I think long term he'll grow into that in the League of Ireland career. I think he's very capable of that. I flagged that early in the season, Adrian, and I was delighted for him against Bray that he saw so much of the ball and he did really, really well. And there's games you'll be able to play Edward in that position, and there's games you'll need Callum McNamara in that position, depending on who the opposition is. Obviously, Bray were all football and the ball was on the deck and things like that, and that suited Edward. If you're in there against big physical boys, and we remember the game in Ferrycarrig Park, and it wasn't Edward's best outing. He was in the middle of the park that night, but he was further up the pitch. So I think you need Matt Keane back in the team, definitely, for his energy. I'd have him in a wide area. I think Edward has to play, whether that's in the middle or whether it's on the wing or whether it's at right back. So it'll be interesting to see what Tommy does with Charlie Fleming. If Callum is fit, he's got to play. We know Jack is going to play, and we know Max Sweeney is going to play. So I suppose, look, it's back to basics, as I said. They need a result, most definitely. And you go to the people who you're going to get a 6 and 7 out of 10 out of every week, Adrian, rather than gambling on your footballers, if you like, that could give you a 4 or 5 out of 10 and the result could go against you. But I can't stress enough, they need a focal point up front. They need Kieran Hanlon back. If he's not available, they need McKevitt up there, because they're just not the same without it.
Yeah, you'd imagine, Noel, that one of the two players, we haven't got a notification of that yet, but you'd imagine one of Matt McKevitt or Kieran Hanlon will be available to Tommy. And do you share Jason's opinion that is vital for them on Friday night?
I think so, yeah. And the word is, well, both of them trained last night, and Callum McNamara trained as well. So hopefully that means that they're all available selections. So a very strong squad to pick from. And certainly with the right team on the pitch, they should be good enough to get the 3 points. But I do agree with Jason. They certainly need a focal point. Kieran Hanlon has done really well there, and in his own way, I think you can go with McKevitt as well. He does a different job than Kieran Hanlon does, but certainly an effective job as well.
Yeah, Jason, there's been a managerial change in the First Division with Athlone Town. Noel did mention that he thought Athlone would have a poor enough season at the very start, and everyone thought he was going to look foolish for the first 4 or 5 games, but he's been in long enough to know that things can change very quickly, and it did for Athlone. Went on a really poor run for a long period. Adrian Carberry has been removed from his position, or it said mutual agreement between both parties, and within 1 day, a day and a half, Paul Doolan is back in charge of a League of Ireland club after quite a long absence. What do you make of that appointment and the whole situation?
Personally, I think it's a great appointment. I really do. I think it's a major coup for Athlone. Obviously, Paul's been out of the League of Ireland for a while, but he did a great job with the 19s international team, as we know. You never relieve a manager, Adrian, of his role unless you've got something in mind. And Mickey O'Connor in Athlone, Noel will be familiar with him as a very, very experienced operator. And look, I flagged it to you yesterday that Paul Doolan had been in doing a session this week as well with Athlone. So, look, when you see the kiss of death, I suppose publications or whatever way you want to put them coming out, when a club back in the manager, then you know he's going to be removed. You know, why clubs do it is beyond me. Like, it really is, because we all knew, myself and you were texting, we knew it was on the cards. Athlone haven't had a good season, but they have got a good squad, Adrian. That's one thing I will say. And I know Paul Doolan went straight in, and it's defensive work he was working on this week. So that'll tell you what his mindset is going into the Galway game. But he's a great appointment. He really is. Adrian Carberry, obviously, we wish him well. He's a good friend of mine and a gentleman of the game. So we hate to see anyone losing their job. But a great appointment for Athlone, in my opinion.
Yeah, Jason mentioned it, Noel. It's the usual vote of confidence. I mean, normally when a manager gets a vote of confidence, he might last 3 or 4 more weeks. In this case, it was about a week and a half max. When Adrian Carberry got the vote of confidence. Do you share Jason's opinion about the appointment, Noel? Because obviously, I know you would have been familiar with Paul Doolan from the couple of clashes, even in the FAI Cup back in the day with Limerick FC. Do you think it's a good appointment and Athlone might get a bounce from this?
Yeah, and we brought a good Wexford team down to Turner's Cross and turned them over in the League Cup semi-final. Paul Doolan led Cork City. Yeah, listen, I suppose the big surprise is how the fact that he has been out of the game for so long. You know, he's very highly rated manager. He did brilliantly in UCD and Drogheda. Went down to Cork. It was very difficult down there. And as Jason said, you know, he did a great job with the Irish 19s. You know, and it was surprising to see that he wasn't out of the game because he has playing experience up in the Irish League as well. And you were thinking that he was going to turn up somewhere, but he hasn't. And he sees this as an opportunity, obviously, for himself as well. Just to get back into the league, he'll certainly make him stronger. Defence has always been a strong point in him. And look, we only had to watch Athlone in the last 4 or 5 weeks, conceding 6 goals and 4 goals and 4 goals, and then signing a couple of attacking midfielders to know that they certainly needed to stop conceding goals. And he'll probably make a huge impact. It's probably not the ideal game, I think, for him on the weekend, the Galway game, because even though he may well improve them, just the mood, the mood and the form the Galway are in, they're certainly going to be a difficult task. But I think obviously between now and the end of the season, they'll certainly make up for their lack of points in the last 8 or 10 games.
Yeah, Jason, just to move from the first division to the Premier Division for a moment, it looked with the form of Longford and Waterford at the start of the season, nearly halfway through even, that both of those places, we'll say the automatic relegation and the playoff relegation, were almost set in stone. Then Mark Bertram comes in from QPR, largely unknown bar his playing career, obviously, with QPR particularly, comes in. He seems to have really excelled with Waterford. The fans are back believing. They've got the points to back that up. I was just looking at the table, and it was a point I'll ask yourself and Noel. Who do you think, I suppose, very hard to choose, but who do you think will be in that playoff place come the end of the season? Because you have Waterford, Finn Harps, you also have Drogheda as well, and even that it seems inconceivable that Dundalk are still down around there at the moment on points wise. So it really is a tasty battle down there.
It is, Adrian, most definitely. And you'd be afraid to mention, wouldn't you? You'd be afraid to mention Finn Harps.
Absolutely.
That's, I suppose, the one that nobody wants if you're a Treaty supporter anyway, I suppose.
The Treaty prefer to play Dundalk, Jason, would they?
Most definitely, I think, Adrian. Definitely. You quite rightly said that Mark Bertrand has done a great job for Waterford. He's turned their fortunes around. And speaking to Martin Dunphy, he seems like a larger-than-life kind of character down there. I know he's having his run-ins with referees and things like that, but he's been very good for the game down there, so we wish him well. I think Waterford will be okay. I genuinely do. Dundalk the same, obviously, but even though that there's nothing in it really, Waterford 25 points, Finn Harps 26, Dundalk 27, and then there's a little bit of a gap for Drogheda on 30. Look, I think, as I said, I think Waterford will be okay. I think Dundalk will be okay, and I hate saying it, but I think it'll be Finn Harps in that position, Adrian. I really do, and there'll be a match for anybody really. I know Galway will give them a game if it's Galway that come out of the playoffs, I suppose. But look, yeah, for me, it's looking like Finn Harps. It really is.
Noel, I know you have a close enough relationship with Paul Hegarty in Finn Harps and Ollie Horgan. Jason obviously has made it clear he thinks it'll be Finn Harps in the playoffs. But the one thing I noticed is, and people say it about the English Championship and League One, is that when a team gets into a rut, it's very hard to get out of it. And looking at the Drogheda form is quite concerning for Tim Clancy, I'd say, at the moment. If I was to go by it, looking at the form, even though Waterford currently occupy the second last place in the league, just judging by the form and the fact that Mark Burton has a new lease of life into the club, I think it's probably going to be Finn Harps and Drogheda battling it out towards the very end. But what's your own opinion on it?
Yeah, and I was listening to the local radio on Monday, and you had the Treaty PRO also predicting that Finn Harps would be in the playoff place. And it's not because of my friendship with Paul Hegarty or Ollie Horgan, but I don't think they will. I thought the Fairview game was a massive game for them. They hadn't won for months, and then they got the win. And if anyone noticed, they went to Sligo and got a fantastic 1-0 win up there, and followed it up with a win over Longford last week. And I think they'll be good enough to stay out of it, and they certainly did it last year as well. And my prediction is Drogheda to make that place, and it was mine at the start of the season as well. I was really surprised at their form and how high up the table they went. But a bit like, it's the business end of the season now. Obviously Waterford in brilliant form, and I think Finn Harps will be good enough to stay out of it, and I'd expect Drogheda to drop into that place by the time the final game of the season is played.
It'll certainly be interesting, and we will be discussing that towards the latter end. A good few games to go yet in that division also. Jason, I'm going to move on just before we move on to our prediction side of the night for the first division. Move on maybe to the junior soccer, just to give it a mention in terms of the league format. Just a lot of people may not know, but the league format's going to be the same as they were supposed to do last season before the cancellation with COVID. So you'll have a round of fixtures where you have 11 fixtures, everyone plays each other once, and then you split in a top 6 and bottom 6, and the bottom 6 will play each other twice, and the top 6 will play each other twice and you'll have obviously going for the league winners and relegation will be the big two battles in either subdivision, shall we call it. Do you think, from your experience in junior soccer, that this type of decision needed to be made, and there needs to be a different approach to the league and the Premier Division?
I do, Adrian. I'm a fan of it. I'll be honest. The league committee kind of attempted it for a couple of seasons. That was kind of kiboshed because of COVID. So fair play to them, I suppose, for sticking to their guns and sticking with that format. I think it's in the benefit and in the interest of all the clubs, really, Adrian, because there's such a big gap, there really is. And anytime I managed in that league, I would have advised players that within that league, there's probably 3 leagues, if that makes sense. You've got probably Fairview, Pike, possibly Ballinanty will know more after this weekend, and next weekend I know they've Pike on Thursday, and I think they've got Fairview the following Thursday. I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong, but they've Fairview coming up really quickly after Pike. So that could have a big bearing on their season, but I'll include them in kind of the top 3 that will be going for the title. Then obviously you have teams that are going to be under no pressure, the likes of Ashling, the likes of Regional, and they're going to be kind of your top 5. Then there's that one place up for grabs, really, in the top 6. It'll depend who hits form. I know Coona were in that position last year. Obviously, Prospect will be looking at it as well. I know Mungred have had a strong start to the season, and they signed Pahern from Rakheel, and it'll definitely make a big difference to them. So I suppose you have that little cluster of teams, that won't be afraid of relegation, and they'll know that they're not really title contenders either at the same time. But then you have, I suppose, Kilmallock, you have Geraldines, you have Janesborough, with a Prospect, and I know Prospect are playing Janesborough on Thursday. That's a big game for both teams, you know, and you have Coona and you have Nina. What way are they going to go? And look, they've no business playing Fairview and Pike and Bala and getting hammerings, Adrian. That's what makes it difficult for managers to get teams out on the pitch, and that's what makes it difficult for managers to get big numbers at training when the players know that they're going to be on the end of heavy defeats, and there's no point dressing it up any other way. So I think it's a positive move. I think there's more meaningful games for everybody. There really is, you know, and I suppose, look, a lot of people were critical that there is a winner of the bottom six as well. And I know that was something we were looking at last year when we were in Janesborough, because the age profile of the squad was very, very young. And that was a realistic goal for that group to finish top of the bottom six. You know, and Noel spoke there about Wexford looking to next year. And that's what junior teams can do with that bottom six if they top it. You know, they can keep players interested and say, right, we'll be in the top six next year and we'll have a cut off it and we'll build towards challenging. So, yeah, look, I think it's a good move by LDMC. I think they're to be applauded for giving it a bit of thought, because junior football is under pressure. And it needs something to change, Adrian. So, yeah, definitely behind it.
Yeah, certainly I am in agreement with at least trying it myself for this season, particularly because they haven't had the chance. And Noel, just wanted the predictions for the Airtricity League First Division, and I've given you maybe a couple of interesting ones, but with Cabinteely hosting Cork. We've just talked about Jekyll and Hyde with Cabinteely all season. They went out, they beat 3-4-1, and then went and lost to Wexford. Similar again. Obviously, then we spoke about Cork City, who I suppose we've failed to mention so far. Barry Coffey, who scored 2 goals for Cork, was playing with Nina at 15 years old in the Limerick District League Premier Division. He's made a massive impact. Do you think Cork's resurgence will continue on Friday?
I do. I think they have the bit between their teeth now, like a couple of big wins. And, you know, albeit a weakened Cove team, I think they'll get a great boost out of hitting 4 at home and the crowd behind them. They're going to Cabinteely. They've lost twice already to them. I think they're in a total different frame of mind now, and they really will be gunning for those 3 points. I'll be very surprised if they don't come out with them.
Yeah, and Jason, you've been given the responsibility of the big clash, we'll say, in terms of Bray being in form, coming back up the league table. They're travelling to Tolka Park, as we mentioned earlier. Shelbourne, you know, will be looking to bounce back as well. How do you see that game going?
I think Shelbourne will bounce back. I'd love, personally, because of my prediction of Galway winning the league, I'd love to think Bray could turn them over. But looking at them last week, Adrian, look, as we said and as we saw, an awful lot of possession, but didn't really do a whole pile in the final third. And I thought Treacy stifled them really, really well up until that 89th minute. Shelbourne are another level again, and they have a cutting edge up front, which is something that Bray didn't have to face last week. So, yeah, I think there'll be a response from Shelbourne. I think they'll take the 3 points there.
And Cove Rounders versus UCD, Coleman's Park, Saturday night. Noel, what's your prediction for that one?
Yeah, I think probably go for UCD. You know, they're kind of a facile win, but they still got 6 goals. I'm not sure about the suspension situation with Cove. I've seen probably a fair bit of Cove because we can watch them on a Saturday night because they don't play on the Friday night, if you like the rest of the teams. But I just think that they lack a bit of a cutting edge, and they're playing a nice bit of football. They're playing a nice brand of football and that. But I just think that there's probably more goals in the UCD team, and they'll be buoyed up with their win last week. And I expect them to come out of Cove with the 3 points.
Yeah, and the most interesting tie probably in terms of, because of the managerial appointment of Paul Doolan and the fact that Galway are in great form, Jason, is Athlone versus Galway, not to mention being a derby, a clash as well between the two sides. Athlone roasted Galway earlier in the season at the Athlone Town Stadium. How do you see this one going? It's an interesting tie.
It's a very interesting one, Adrian. As you said, look, without the managerial change, you're saying it's probably a Galway victory, but look, I think Paul Doolan will change things up. He'll make Athlone a little bit more hard to beat. Whether he can do that straight away in a couple of sessions that he's done this week is debatable, but it is a derby game. We have crowds back, so you'd expect an atmosphere there. Look, I think if Galway aren't on form, then they could be held to a draw. But look, I'd like to think that Galway will have enough. But there won't be a whole pile in it. I'm leaning kind of towards a draw, but yeah, there's not going to be a whole pile in that, Adrian.
And would I be right in saying, Noel, that you think that Treaty can overcome Wexford on Friday?
Yeah, I think they can. I think, look, with the news of McKevitt and Kieran Hanlon and Callum McNamara, look, you never really have a full deck to pick from, but I think, Treaty have a very strong squad to pick from. I think if they're nice and positive this week, they obviously have to be careful because there certainly is a goal threat in Wexford, but in saying there's a goal threat in Wexford, there certainly is defensive weaknesses as well. And Treaty have shown that they're capable of exploiting those in the previous 2 games, and they should be good enough to exploit them again on Friday night.
Are you in agreement with that, Jason?
I am, most definitely. It's time to put a stop to the defeats. I think we have the players to stop that run. Wexford will certainly be competitive for as long as Treaty allowed them to be. But if Kieran Hanlon is back in the side, if Callum is back in the side, then I certainly think Treaty have enough to get the win, and I think they will.
And I know we are a soccer show, and that's predominantly all we've talked about is local and we'll say League of Ireland football. But it would be remiss of me not to mention the big clash in hurling with Limerick playing Cork in the All-Ireland final. And I know, Noel O'Connor, you normally open from 12 to 4 in the Butchers on William Street, but surely you'll allow yourself the chance to watch that from 3:30 in throw-in on Sunday.
Yeah, we've decided that we'll start a half an hour early and finish an hour early, so 11:30 to 3 on Sunday. Actually, it's a game I'm looking forward to myself. I suppose I did grow up watching a lot of hurling, went to a lot of hurling matches with my father, and we were always seemed to be at the wrong end of Cork defeats. As I always say about Cork teams, they only have to be half as good as you to beat you. But I think it'll be a cracking game. I still think that this Limerick team is kind of a freak for me. I think they're just incredible. We'll hardly see the likes of them again. We certainly haven't seen the likes of them before. And I think the pain of the defeat to Kilkenny in the semi-final a couple of years ago is still burning inside them. And I don't think that's going to be sated until they certainly win at least one more All-Ireland, if not more than one. And I think just the sheer power of them will probably get them over the line on Sunday.
And we certainly echo that and hope that is the case. Jason, will you be positioning on the couch for the game come 3:30?
I think you know the answer to that, Adrian. Boxing would be my second sport, Adrian, so I'm not much of a hurling fan. I think I'll take the dog for a walk.
What a